To understand the state of mess we are in, let me tell the story of Sophia Rahimi. So this lady is 68 years old. She's a retired school teacher. She lives in Michigan. She's been an American citizen for 40 years. She has voted in every single election since she naturalized. She loves this country. This morning she drove to the grocery store. She put food in her cart. She walked to the checkout. She handed over her debit card. Card declined. She thought it was a mistake. Tried again. Declined. She drove to the ATM. Account frozen. She called the bank. After a long wait, she got a representative. The representative read from a script. Your account has been flagged for review under Office of Foreign Assets Control Regulations. We cannot provide additional information at this time. The freeze will remain in place pending investigation. There is no timeline for resolution. Sophia has $900 in her checking account. Her Social Security check deposits next week. She needs groceries today. She needs her medication today, and she cannot access a single dollar of her own money. Why? Because 40 years ago, Sophia Rahimi was born in Tehran, and because once a year she sends her sister $100 for her birthday. That's it. That's her crime. That's what got her frozen. And as you watch this right now, at this exact moment, Sophia is not alone. There are thousands of people like her across America. Students, business owners, families, American citizens, all of them waking up this morning to find that their money they earned, money they saved, money they need today, isn't accessible. Not because of anything they did, because of a war that started 3 hours ago and a financial system that doesn't distinguish between an IRGC general and a retired school teacher who sends $100 to her sister on her birthday. I need you to understand what's actually happening here, because here's what I'm seeing that the cable coverage is completely missing. There are two wars running simultaneously right now. One is on camera, the fighter jets, the explosions, the aircraft carriers. The other is invisible. It's running in bank computer systems and treasury databases and OFAC review queues. And the invisible war is affecting more American lives in the next 24 hours than the visible one. Let me show you both. Let me show you how they connect. And let me show you what this means for your money, your accounts, and the financial system you're operating inside. Because whether you have Iranian connections or not, what I'm about to walk you through changes the picture of what it means to have money in an American bank account. Track 1. The Visible War. What happened in the last 12 hours? Let me give you the timeline, because the sequence matters for understanding everything that follows. February 27th, Geneva, Switzerland. Late afternoon local time. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi have just finished what intelligence sources described as the final round of negotiations. Witkoff walks out. No deal. Iran offered to cap uranium enrichment at 3.67%. Above weapons-grade threshold, but below immediate weapons capability. Trump's position was zero enrichment, period. Iran offered to dilute their existing stockpile. Trump demanded it be shipped out of the country entirely. The positions were incompatible. The talks were over. At 3:00 p.m., Washington time, Trump called Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. 4 minutes. Single order. Execute Operation Persian Freedom. Strike Package Alpha. Tonight. By midnight Eastern, the machinery was moving. B-2 stealth bombers out of Whiteman Air Force Base, Missouri. F-35s launching from Ovda Air Base in southern Israel. Tomahawk cruise missiles armed and targeted on the USS Gerald Ford and USS Abraham Lincoln. 6 target packages. Natanz nuclear facility, Fordo enrichment site, Isfahan uranium conversion plant, Revolutionary Guard intelligence headquarters in Tehran, Parchin military complex. At 7:03 a.m. Tehran time, 10:33 p.m. Washington time on the 27th, the first ordnance hit. Now here's what I need you to see. At the exact same moment the military operation was executing, a parallel operation launched. Same urgency, same scale, different weapon. Track 2, The Invisible War. What Bessent was doing while the bombs fell. At midnight, while those bombers were airborne, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent was on a different phone call, not with generals, with oil market analysts, because here's the economic reality I've been tracking that drove every financial decision made in the last 12 hours. When the United States bombs Iran, Iran has one retaliatory option that doesn't require firing a single missile at American soil. The Strait of Hormuz. 20% of global daily oil supply flows through that 21-mile-wide choke point. If Iran mines it, or even convincingly threatens to mine it, oil doesn't rise. It reprices to a different regime entirely. What I found when I pulled the analyst projections Besant was working with, $150 per barrel by Monday, $200 by Wednesday, potentially higher. Translate those numbers to the pump. $150 oil means $7.50 gasoline across America. $200 oil means $10, and that's without panic buying. With it, prices go higher. Gas lines, rationing, the economic disruption of a genuine supply shock at that scale doesn't look like a recession. It looks like a depression. So Besant had one job: prevent Iran from executing the Hormuz option. Not through military means, that's someone else's lane. Through financial means, preemptive financial warfare so comprehensive and immediate that Iran's ability to sustain any prolonged retaliatory campaign gets degraded before it starts. At 8:01 a.m. Eastern, the moment the bombs started officially falling and Trump declared a national emergency, the legal foundation was laid. IEEPA, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Presidential Emergency Declaration activates it instantly. No congressional vote. No court order, unlimited authority to freeze assets, block transactions, impose economic isolation. This is the same law used on Russia in 2022, same law used on Venezuela. It's settled, tested, repeatedly upheld. At 8:47 a.m., Besant signed Executive Order 14037, Emergency Economic Measures regarding Iran. And I want to walk you through exactly what's in it, because the scope is larger than what's being reported. Every Iranian bank, specially designated national status, blocked, frozen. Any American institution that touches an Iranian bank account loses its own access to the financial system. The IRGC, already designated a terrorist organization, secondary designation tightened. Anyone doing business with IRGC-connected entities, frozen. Iran's entire oil sector, National Iranian Oil Company, every subsidiary, every ship in their shadow fleet, over 200 tankers, blocked. Any company that insures those ships, finances them, or receives them at port, blocked. Any trader who purchased Iranian oil in the past 12 months, review and potential freeze. And then the provision that's catching people off guard this morning, secondary sanctions. If you're not Iranian, if you're American, if you've done business with a company that does business with Iran, not with Iran directly, with a company that does, you can be flagged. 2 degrees of separation. In some cases, 3. The algorithm doesn't evaluate intent. It doesn't weigh context. It pattern matches. At 9:03 a.m. Eastern, the emergency directive went to every major bank in America simultaneously. JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Citibank. Every significant financial institution. 3 paragraphs. Subject line: immediate compliance required. Iran sanctions enforcement. Freeze all accounts with Iranian nexus. Block all transfers to or from Iranian entities. Report all suspicious activity immediately. No exceptions, no delays, and the machine's activated. The algorithm, how it works, and why it doesn't care about Sophia. Here's the plumbing I want to walk you through, because understanding this mechanism is the difference between thinking this is a targeted policy and understanding what it actually is. Banks run OFAC screening software, Office of Foreign Assets Control Compliance Technology, on every account and every transaction. It scans names, addresses, transaction histories, entities involved, comparing everything against the SDN list, the specially designated nationals list. Thousands of names, Iranian government officials, IRGC commanders, Iranian banks, state-owned companies, anyone previously sanctioned. Under normal operations, when the software flags a potential match, the account goes to human review. A compliance officer evaluates the context, makes a judgment. Under an emergency directive like this morning's, that process doesn't exist. Human review takes hours. Treasury's directive said immediate, and the banks face an asymmetric choice. If they process a sanctioned transaction, the penalties are criminal. Billions in fines. Executive prosecution. If they freeze 1,000 innocent people, there's no penalty. There's just a bureaucratic process that eventually, maybe, sorts it out. So the calculation is simple. Freeze first, review never, or review eventually. And the algorithm isn't subtle. It sees Iranian name, Iranian passport on file, transactions to Iran in the last 2 years, transfers received from Iranian origin accounts, transaction history involving Dubai intermediaries that might carry Iranian oil revenue. It sees any of these and it acts immediately, without appeal, without notification, without human judgment. Sophia Rahimi, Iranian birth name, Iranian origin surname, annual transfer to Iran, flag, freeze, Reza Ahmadi, Iranian passport, family-originated tuition payments from Iran, small transfers back to support parents, 24 years old, $11,400 in savings, his rent money, his emergency fund, his life. This morning at 7:30 a.m. Pacific time, he tried to buy breakfast. Card declined. After an hour on hold with his bank, frozen under OFAC compliance. No timeline for resolution. Reza is not on any sanctions list. He is not an IRGC official. He is a PhD student at Stanford who sends money home to help his family survive. Parisa Tehrani, American-born, third generation, runs an import business in Los Angeles, textiles from Turkey. Been operating for 12 years, nothing to do with Iran directly. But some of her Turkish suppliers purchase Iranian cotton, process it into finished goods, export from Turkey. This morning her business account was frozen, $270,000. Her working capital, payroll is Friday, suppliers are expecting payment next week, the warehouse rent is due. None of that pauses while OFAC reviews whether Parisa's indirect supply chain exposure constitutes a sanctions risk. And when she calls the bank, under review, no timeline. Her options: hire a lawyer at $5,000 minimum retainer, file an OFAC appeal, wait 6 months for a response that might say yes or might say no, or give up, close the business, fire her employees, walk away, because fighting the government costs money she no longer has access to. Here's what I need you to understand about those 3 cases. They're not exceptions. They're the system functioning as designed, and Treasury knows this. The goal isn't to freeze every Iranian-connected account forever. The goal is to create sufficient fear and uncertainty that every institution, every business, every individual with any potential Iranian connection self-selects out, stops all activity, avoids any transaction that might get flagged. Because the cost of being frozen, even temporarily, even if you eventually get released, is catastrophic for a small business, devastating for a student living on savings, potentially permanent in its damage to a family's financial stability. Fear does the work that explicit legal prohibition can't. That's the design. The scale, and the people nobody's counting. Let me give you the numbers I'm tracking on the population impact, because the scale of what's happening this morning is genuinely larger than anything being reported. According to State Department data, approximately 47,000 Iranian students are currently studying in America. If 10% wake up to frozen accounts, conservative given the algorithm's scope, that's 4,700 students who can't access money for food, rent, textbooks, medication. If it's 20%, nearly 10,000. All of them having done nothing legally wrong, all of them caught by an automated system that was designed for IRGC generals and got deployed against PhD students. The Iranian-American community in Los Angeles alone is approximately 300,000 people. Across New York, DC, Houston, Dallas, Chicago, the Iranian-American diaspora in this country numbers well over 1 million people. If 1% face some form of account action today, that's 10,000 families. At 2%, it's 20,000. We're talking about a financial event that affects more American residents than most natural disasters. Invisible, uncovered, happening in the background while the cameras watch the fighter jets. And those are only the people with direct Iranian connections. The secondary sanctions provision extends the reach to indirect connections. American businesses with Middle Eastern supply chains, companies that trade through Dubai intermediaries. Anyone whose transaction history has 2 or 3 degrees of separation from an entity that the algorithm associates with Iran. The full scope of accounts flagged in the first 24 hours of this enforcement action won't be known for days, but based on what I'm tracking this morning, it's substantial. The legal reality, and why the courts won't move fast enough. I want to be straight with you about the legal picture because you're going to hear a lot of commentary over the next few days about due process and constitutional challenges, and I want you to have a realistic framework. The ACLU is preparing litigation, the Center for Constitutional Rights, the National Iranian American Council. They'll argue Fifth Amendment, seizure of property without individual finding of wrongdoing, without hearing, without due process. Compelling arguments in normal circumstances. But here's what I found when I looked at IEPA case history. This is not normal circumstances legally. IEPA is settled law with decades of precedent. Courts have consistently held that during declared national emergencies, executive economic authority is broad. The president doesn't need a court order to freeze assets under IEPA. Congress gave him that authority explicitly, and courts have repeatedly deferred to executive branch judgment on national security applications. The Fifth Amendment arguments have been raised before, against Russian asset freezes, against Venezuelan sanctions. They've largely failed, so the lawsuits will be filed. They'll probably lose or they'll win years from now. And in the meantime, 6 months, 12 months, Sophia can't buy groceries. Razor's rent is due. Parisa's employees need to be paid. The legal system resolves this on a timeline completely incompatible with the immediacy of the harm. Here's the practical reality for anyone affected right now. If your account is frozen, the path forward is OFAC appeal, direct application to the Office of Foreign Assets Control, with documentation proving your transactions are legitimate and you're not a sanctions risk. Standard review timeline, 6 months. In complex cases, 12 months or longer. No guarantee of release at the end. And if you can't afford a lawyer to navigate the appeal process, your documentation may be insufficient. The system is not designed to be navigable without professional help, and professional help costs money you can no longer access. The oil war, why Besant is racing and why he's losing. Let me zoom back to the economic war, because here's what I'm watching that connects the individual human cost of the freezes to the macro picture. Iran produces 3.8 million barrels of oil per day. Much of it flows through shadow networks, ships with transponders disabled, Chinese and Indian intermediaries, payments in yuan to avoid dollar clearing. This supply is real, it matters to global prices, and starting today, Treasury is going after all of it. EO 1.37 designates over 200 ships in Iran's shadow fleet as blocked entities. Any company insuring them, blocked. Any port receiving them, blocked. Any financier, blocked. The threat to third-party buyers is existential. Keep purchasing Iranian oil and lose access to US dollar markets, which means losing access to global trade finance. For most Chinese and Indian refiners, the calculation is clear. Dollar access is worth more than Iranian oil. They stop, officially, which means 3.8 million barrels per day disappears from global supply, which is why oil closed at $82 on Friday, and analysts expect $120–130 by Monday's market open. And that's the no-escalation scenario. If Iran makes any credible move toward Hormuz, not even a closure, just a credible threat backed by visible military positioning, we reprice immediately toward 150–175s. If they actually mine the Strait or attack tankers, we're in 200-plus territory. $10 gasoline, depression-level economic disruption. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve release, 100 million barrels authorized this morning, provides a partial cushion, but the SPR holds approximately 380 million barrels total. If Iranian supply stays offline for months, the reserve provides weeks of buffer, not months. And here's the strategic problem I'm watching unfold. Iran was prepared for exactly this. After Russia got frozen in 2022, Iran studied the playbook. They spent 3 years building alternatives. Gold reserves transferred to physical holdings inside Iran, out of Western legal reach. Trade with China increasingly settled in yuan, bypassing dollar clearing. Domestic Bitcoin mining operations, peer-to-peer transfer networks, relationships with non-Western financial institutions in jurisdictions where Treasury's threats are real, but political compliance is complicated. Iran is not completely insulated. The freezes hurt. Cutting off their shadow fleet hurts, but it doesn't achieve what Treasury is hoping, a rapid capitulation driven by financial desperation. And if financial pressure doesn't produce quick negotiation, the military campaign continues, which means oil price uncertainty continues, which means the economic pressure on ordinary Americans, at the gas pump, in the grocery store, in their retirement accounts, continues and compounds. The crypto front and what it reveals about everything at 9:15 a.m. Eastern, or 12 minutes after the bank directive, Treasury sent a second message. Coinbase, Kraken, Binance US, every registered crypto exchange in America. The directive: monitor for Iranian users circumventing sanctions through digital assets, report suspicious activity, block accounts if necessary. Here's what I'm tracking on the crypto picture and why it matters beyond the Iranian angle. The entire value proposition of cryptocurrency was censorship resistance. No central authority, no government kill switch. You hold the private keys, you own the asset, period. That was the promise. And for truly self-custodied Bitcoin, cold wallet, private keys, offline storage, that promise holds. The Treasury cannot freeze a wallet it doesn't control. But here's what I found when I pulled exchange usage data. The vast majority of retail crypto holders don't self-custody. They use Coinbase, Kraken, Binance. They use exchanges as their interface. Convenient, familiar, connected to their bank accounts. And exchanges are custodians. When you hold Bitcoin on Coinbase, you hold a claim on Coinbase's Bitcoin, not Bitcoin itself. That's a legal and practical distinction that almost nobody understands until it matters. And this morning, it matters. Starting today, exchanges are flagging Iranian users, Iranian IP addresses, Iranian identification documents, wallets that have previously transacted with Iranian addresses, all of them restricted, can't withdraw, can't convert to dollars, can't access their funds, frozen, just like bank accounts. Ali Moradi is 29 years old, software developer, works remotely for an American company, paid in dollars. His parents are in Iran. He sends them $500 a month through crypto because traditional international wire transfers to Iran are expensive and difficult. He sends money to his parents so they can eat. This morning he tried to withdraw his salary, $3,200, to pay his bills. Account restricted under sanctions compliance review. No timeline. Ali isn't sanctioned. He's not on any list. He sends money to his parents, and now his money is frozen alongside Reza's, alongside Parisa's, alongside Sophia's. Bitcoin fell 6% in the 3 hours after the war started. And here's the question I'm watching traders process in real time. If the government can reach into exchanges and freeze accounts during a national emergency, what does censorship resistance actually mean? The answer emerging from this morning's events is, it depends on your custody model. Self-custody, air-gapped, private keys in your control, genuinely resistant. Exchange custody, exposed to the same government authority as any bank account, with slightly different legal mechanisms. This is a revelation that changes how serious crypto holders should think about their exposure. Gold, meanwhile, is up 3% today, breaking $4,300 per ounce. I want to be specific about why, because the reason matters for how you think about it. Physical gold, in your possession or in fully allocated segregated vault storage, where you own specific bars with serial numbers, has no custodian. There is no exchange. There is no institution standing between you and the asset. There is no algorithm that can flag it and freeze it. It's yours materially, not just as a claim on a financial institution's balance sheet. And in a morning where financial institutions are demonstrating, very concretely, that custody relationships can be disrupted by government order, the premium on asset ownership over asset claims is visible in real time. The global signal, what every other country is doing right now. Let me zoom out, because what's happening to individual accounts this morning is generating second-order effects in government finance ministries around the world that will play out over the next decade. China convened an emergency National Security Commission meeting this morning. The topic, according to my sources, protecting Chinese state assets from US financial warfare, because Beijing's analysis is straightforward. If the US can freeze Iranian accounts with this speed and this scope, the same infrastructure exists for Chinese assets if Taiwan tensions ever reach a similar threshold. The capability has been demonstrated, the legal authority is established, the operational playbook is documented. So China accelerates de-dollarization. Not a new project, this has been running since 2022, but accelerated. Moving reserves out of dollar-denominated treasuries into physical gold, into yuan-denominated instruments, into CPS, into digital yuan infrastructure. Building the parallel financial system that doesn't require American bank clearing to function. Russia has been on this path since 2022, when $300 billion in sovereign reserves were frozen after Ukraine. SWIFT access cut. Financial warfare deployed. Russia's response: build alternatives, work with China and Iran, create payment infrastructure that routes around Western financial gatekeeping. They're further along this path than China. India watching, Brazil watching, Saudi Arabia watching, every country that has ever had friction with Washington, which is most of them, at various points in recent history, is looking at February 28, 2026 and updating their calculation about how much dependency on American financial infrastructure is safe. Here's the strategic irony I keep coming back to. The dollar's reserve status, America's single greatest non-military source of global power, rests on a foundation of trust. Other countries hold dollars because dollars are perceived as a neutral store of value that won't be weaponized against them. Every time the dollar gets weaponized, that trust erodes. Every freeze, every sanction, every Iranian student whose card gets declined at a coffee shop. Each one becomes a data point for every foreign finance ministry running a de-dollarization calculation. And those calculations, aggregated across 100 countries over a decade, produce a gradual weakening of the dollar's reserve status that undermines American financial power more fundamentally than any single military loss. Besant's bet is that the short-term benefit, degrading Iran's ability to sustain the conflict, outweighs the long-term cost of accelerated de-dollarization. Maybe it's the right trade, but it's a real trade, and it's being made right now, and its full cost won't be visible for years. What Monday looks like, and what I'm tracking. Let me give you the market picture for Monday's open, because today is Friday and markets are closed, and by the time they reopen, the early week trajectory will be significantly shaped by how this weekend develops. Oil futures will gap up. I'm watching Brent crude and WTI in Sunday evening trading as the first real-time market signal. If Gulf equity markets, which open Sunday, drop 3 to 5% as analysts are projecting, US futures gap down accordingly. A 3% gap down on S&P 500 is approximately $900 billion in market cap evaporation between Friday close and Monday open. That happens without a single trade by a retail investor. Your retirement account just absorbs it. Defense sector will appreciate. Raytheon, Lockheed, Northrop. This is mechanical. Military conflict means weapons orders. Weapons orders mean revenue. Revenue means earnings. Earnings mean stock price. This isn't speculation, it's correlation that has held in every modern conflict. Tech with Iranian exposure, companies that have operations in the region or supply chain exposure, will face scrutiny and likely decline as compliance costs and operational uncertainty get priced in. Crypto, watch Bitcoin against the 30-day moving average. If the exchange freeze actions expand significantly over the weekend, more platforms, more aggressive enforcement, we could see 20-30% drawdown as the custodian risk premium gets priced in. Self-custodied Bitcoin is structurally different from exchange-held Bitcoin, and that distinction is going to get more broadly understood after this weekend. Gold. I'm not calling the price, but the demand dynamics. Flight from custodian risk, inflation hedge against oil-driven price pressure, de-dollarization buying from foreign central banks, all of those are constructive going into next week. The 5 indicators I'm watching in real time. 1. Brent crude backwardation. If spot exceeds forward price significantly, that's physical supply stress, not just fear. It means the Hormuz threat is being priced as likely, not theoretical. 2. OFAC SDN list update frequency. If Treasury is adding Chinese entities, companies that historically bought Iranian oil, that signals escalation towards secondary sanctions on major trading partners. That's a different economic war than the one that started today. 3. US 10-year Treasury yield. Breaking decisively above 5% changes equity discount rates. Inflation expectations from oil-driven price pressure make this a real risk by end of next week. 4. Bank CDS spreads. Credit default swap spreads on major US banks measure market-assigned default probability. Watch JP Morgan, Bank of America, Citibank specifically. Widening of 50-plus basis points in a session is a signal, not noise. 100-plus basis points is a warning. 5. Standing repo facility usage, published with 48-hour delay from the Fed. If banks are accessing emergency overnight funding at elevated rates, visible in the weekly data, that's the banking system stress indicator that precedes the public headlines by days. The precedent, the question nobody's asking. I've been sitting with this all morning, and I need to say it directly because I think it's the most important part of what happened today. The system that woke up this morning, the capability that froze Sophia Rahimi's account before she got to the checkout line, that system doesn't get decommissioned when the Iran crisis ends. The algorithms don't get deleted. The legal authorities don't get surrendered. The banks don't uninstall the OFAC software. It stays, it gets maintained, it gets upgraded. Each deployment reveals operational gaps, which get patched. Each legal challenge reveals vulnerabilities, which get addressed through regulatory refinement. What I'm tracking is not just today's human cost, real and significant as it is. I'm tracking the trajectory. The system becomes more capable with each use. The legal foundation becomes more established. The operational playbook becomes more refined, and it waits for the next target. Russia was the capability demonstration. Iran is the full deployment. The next use, whenever it comes, against whatever target, will be faster, broader, and more automated than what happened this morning. Because this morning already happened. The precedent is set. Emergency declaration, Treasury directive, algorithms activated, accounts frozen, assets blocked. All of it in under 3 hours. No court involvement, no congressional authorization, no due process for the individuals caught in it. Here's the question I want you to hold. What is the limiting principle? What is the legal or constitutional guardrail that prevents this capability from being pointed at a different target under a different declared emergency? Because from what I've researched today, the honest answer is presidential judgment about what constitutes a national emergency. That's the gate. And if that gate opens for Iran, the gate exists for the next emergency. I'm not telling you this to generate fear. I'm telling you this because understanding the system you're operating inside is the prerequisite for making rational decisions about your financial exposure to that system. The money in your bank account is yours until a presidential declaration, an emergency directive, and an algorithm determine otherwise. That's not paranoia. That's the documented legal and operational reality of February 28, 2026. What to do? Practical framework. Right now. Let me get specific and practical because analysis without action isn't useful. If you have Iranian connections, heritage, business relationships, prior transfers to or from Iran, supply chain exposure to Middle Eastern entities, check your accounts right now. If they're accessible, document everything. Transaction records, statements going back 24 months, proof of the legitimate purpose of every transfer that could be misread by pattern matching software. If you get frozen, this documentation is your primary tool in the OFAC appeal process. And get a compliance attorney this week, not next week. The earlier you're in the queue, the earlier your appeal gets filed. If you do business with companies that have indirect Middle Eastern supply chain exposure, anything through Dubai, Turkey, regional intermediaries, talk to a compliance attorney about your secondary sanctions exposure. Seriously, this week. If you have crypto holdings on exchanges, Coinbase, Kraken, Binance, any custodial platform, today demonstrated very clearly that custodial crypto and self-custodied crypto are categorically different assets from a government access perspective. That's a personal risk tolerance question, not a political one. What's your actual exposure? For your broader financial positioning going into what could be weeks of oil price volatility. If your portfolio has zero energy exposure, you're sitting entirely on the losing side of the oil price equation. You feel the pump price increases through your household budget with no offsetting benefit through your investments. Energy sector equity exposure creates partial correlation with the cost you're already bearing. Physical gold versus paper gold, and I want to be specific here. If your gold exposure is in ETFs, in futures, in certificates, you own a claim on a custodian's gold. Today demonstrated what custodial claims can be subject to. Fully allocated, segregated storage where you own specific bars with serial numbers is structurally different, not better in all scenarios. But the counterparty risk profile is meaningfully different from an exchange-traded fund. And cash liquidity. If this conflict extends weeks and oil drives inflation into household budgets the way I described earlier, adding $150 to $200 per month in fuel, grocery, and utility costs by April, you need accessible, liquid buffer to absorb that without going into high-interest debt. 3 months of expenses, liquid and accessible. That's the appropriate buffer for the scenario range in front of us. Closing. 2 wars, 1 morning, and what you know now. Let me bring this home. There are 2 wars running right now. One is visible, the fighter jets, the carrier battle groups, the satellite imagery of destroyed facilities. That war is getting enormous coverage, wall to wall, every channel, every platform. The other war is invisible. It's running in bank computer systems and Treasury enforcement queues and OFAC databases. It's affecting thousands of people this morning. Students who can't buy food, business owners who can't make payroll, retired teachers who can't buy groceries, and it's receiving almost none of the coverage it deserves. And here's what connects them. The invisible war is the more financially consequential one for most Americans. Not because account freezes are more destructive than bombs in absolute terms, but because the invisible war's effects are not contained to a geographic theatre. They're distributed across the financial system. They affect the oil prices you pay next week. They affect the market you check Monday morning. They affect the inflation that compounds in your grocery bill through March and April. They affect the global confidence in the dollar system that every other country is quietly recalibrating right now. Sophia Rahimi couldn't buy groceries this morning. That's the visible face of the invisible war. The invisible face is $120 oil by Monday, interest rate pressure on bank balance sheets, the 5 indicators I'm watching that will tell us whether this stays a geopolitical correction or becomes a systemic financial event. I need you to watch those 5 indicators this week. I need you to track the OFAC updates, the oil backwardation signal, the bank CDS spreads. Not because I want you afraid, because understanding the mechanism is the difference between reacting to the crisis and anticipating it. The war started at 7:03 a.m. Tehran time. The financial operation started simultaneously, and unlike the military campaign, which will end when both sides reach exhaustion or agreement, the financial infrastructure deployed today doesn't stand down. It becomes permanent capability, waiting for the next activation. Now you see both wars. Now you understand the mechanism that connects them. The question, as always, is what you do with that understanding. Drop your read in the comments. I want to know what exposure you're seeing in your sector, your supply chain, your portfolio. I want to know if you think Besant's strategy forces Iran to the table, or if Iran's financial preparations are robust enough to absorb it. This community's collective read is ahead of the consensus. I'm watching. This is Andrew John, February 28th, 2026. The war that nobody's covering is already inside your bank account.